It's time to make sports talk great again with Curt Schilling and Steve Deace.
Greetings. Happy Wednesday. I'm Steve Deace. He is World Series champion, future Hall of Famer Curt Schilling. Welcome to The Blaze. Whether you're watching on YouTube, The Blaze, or listening via podcast today, here's the deal. Every day, we put 25 minutes on the clock, get to as many of the day's sports topics in that amount of time as we possibly can. Mr. Schilling, are you ready to go?
I am ready to go.
All right, and so it begins now. Finally, one of them has signed. Yesterday, Manny Machado shocked Major League Baseball, not by the fact he signed the second richest contract in the history of the game. I think a lot of people thought he was going to approach these kinds of numbers, but more so whom he signed with. The San Diego Padres, a team that has not had a winning season since 2010 and has only made the playoffs twice since their last World Series appearance in 1998. That was 21 years ago. And one of those playoff appearances, they won the division with an 82-80 record. Okay, so this has been a moribund franchise for quite a while. This reminds me a little bit, although Pudge was much older than Machado, this reminds me a little bit of when my Tigers were trying to come out of a lost decade, and they signed him to a big contract in free agency, and they didn't win right away, but it was essentially a stamp of legitimacy that they were serious about taking the next step as a franchise. Now, when you look at Machado's numbers, he does have 4 straight seasons of 30 or more home runs. You don't typically see that kind of production from the shortstop position.
Playing in Camden Yards.
Yeah, that helps. He also, though, when you look at these numbers too, over the course of his career, he has hit over 300 once. He's had more than 100 RBIs once. He's had a top 10 wins against replacement with, which is, I think, a stat given the team he's on. It's an important stat anyway, but even more important with the team he's on because he's expected to be a Mike Troutian figure, the rising tide that lifts all boats here. He's only had a top 10 WAR one time. So, your thoughts on this signing? Is he worth the money? In Vegas, the Padres saw their odds to win the World Series go from 100-1 to 66-1 yesterday. Your thoughts, Curt Schilling?
He's getting paid a lot of money to live in probably the best weather in the country, was my first thought. I mean, think about it. He gets $300 million for the next 10 years and he gets surf. And it's never worse than 75. It's a great place to play and live. If you don't care a whole lot about the pressure of a big city, and winning and going to the postseason isn't something that is front and center. And I think those things both. Listen, I think he's a potential Hall of Fame talent. Mm-hmm. The only 100 RBI season, to me, RBIs are a byproduct of the lineup and the team you play on as much as anything.
Well, then to me, when I look at that number, I think that's even more damning because he played on some Orioles teams that had some really good lineups. He's not going to say he's not going to right now. The second best hitter for the Padres, Ian Kinsler. Who is it?
Probably Will Myers. Here's the thing. This is the kind of signing that you make and I think I might have said this to you yesterday. Actually, no, I did it in Twitter. This is the signing I make when this is my final piece. Right. This is my signing that I say to my fans, okay, we are now contenders. Because you can't first of all, go back in history and look at the amount of times somebody signed a $200+ million contract and gone to the playoffs the year they signed that player, number one. It's rare. It almost never happens. More importantly, when do you ever see a team build around a $300 million player? Mm-hmm. Right? That's usually the guy that they bring in, which is, I think, more the Phillies than anybody right now. They're thinking that, they've got the young pitching. They've got some young talent.
Was Pujols the first one to get the $200 million kind of deal you're talking about? Close, yeah. How many playoff series have the Angels won?
Oh no. Yeah. No, none.
Yeah.
None. But again, like I said,
I would say Albert Pujols at the time he signed his contract was a better player.
Oh, it was not even close.
Manny Machado is.
His numbers were all already Hall of Fame.
Right.
At that time.
Right.
But like I said, it turns out to me that, and here's the game I play, and I'll do this with you. I've done this with fans before. I'm going to give you a 10-year contract, and I'm going to give you $250 million. You get to go back in time and give that contract to any player you want who would fulfill the value of that deal. Do you know how many players literally you could give that deal to who had 8 of 10 good years?
Right.
It's almost non-existent. You got Maddox, Glavine, not even Clemens. I mean, when you start going, so if in hindsight I can go back over 20 years and find less than 10 people, it shows me. But here's the other thing that you have to recognize: you're not paying for future numbers; you're paying for a lot of past performance. But in this case, I don't see it. I think he's a Hall of Fame talent. I think he's defensively he's a very special player. But he's going to play 100 of 162 games in San Diego, which is a hitter's hell, and Dodger Stadium. So, and Coors Field has been kind of neutered from a home run perspective. So I said yesterday, he's going to go out this year. He's going to hit 288, hit 25 homers, and drive in 91 runs, and people are going to freak out. And that's going to be where he's playing and the team he's playing on a good year. But he's not being paid anymore to have good years. He's being paid to take his team to the World Series, and that's just not going to happen.
What's Padres management? The White Sox thought they had this signing, and then the Padres came in. They thought they were willing to pay the $30 million a year here. They just wanted it for 6 or 7 years. So the Padres came in at the last minute, according to several reports. Came into the last minute and said, "Yeah, we'll give you the full 10." So what is San Diego ownership thinking here? Because I was watching on MLB Network recently. They do those hour-long documentaries on individual seasons, that are really cool to watch. And I was watching the one from 1980. They did in 1984, the magical season my Tigers had. And they were talking with Steve Garvey about how he made the decision to move from L.A., where he had been an MVP with the Dodgers, to going to a franchise that had never made the postseason before and had just lost its franchise player in Dave Winfield and free agency, and why he went to San Diego. And he said he sat down with Ray Kroc, the founder of McDonald's and who was the original owner of the Padres, and basically he sold him on being a pivotal piece and a difference maker in this community, where in LA he's just one of 100 stars, but in San Diego he could really have a huge humanitarian impact in a community like this. And Garvey said that was what caused him to make this decision back in those days. So that was kind of a window to the soul of what you're thinking on the management side of things at that time. What's the current Padres management? They made this signing. Why?
I don't have an answer. They made this signing because they want to. 9 times out of 10, part of a large part of this is to convince your fan base that you're serious. Which
is the Pudge Rodriguez analogy that I made, at the beginning of this, right? In fact, they even wore the same number. I mean, there's Machado wearing 8, Pudge wore number 8 for the Tigers.
Yeah, this is, but it's trying to convince you. And listen, I like San Diego. I like the franchise. I like the ownership. I think that they've tried to.
They should go back to their original uniforms, but yes,
they should. I totally agree on that one. But again, I look at the roster and I see a lot of young talent. But I also don't see.
And you want to build it around a guy who puts in writing that he doesn't hustle all the time.
Well, and listen, I honestly think that was more of a language barrier thing. I don't. Yes, he's been caught doing, and he's done some kind of peculiar things.
I like the use of that word. Nice.
Yeah.
Nice play. I liked it. Curt Schilling, ladies and gentlemen, mark the tape. Curt Schilling has confirmed he understands subtlety after all. So, yes, I'm sorry. Continue,
But again,
yes.
I told you before, Steve, and we've talked about this. What you have to understand as a fan is there are a lot of decisions that go into this final decision that you don't think about. Mm-hmm. Does your wife like the area? Do your kids like the area? What are the school districts like? Because there has to be an enormous amount of allure and inviting aspects of this deal to overcome the fact that he's going to pay socialist level taxes for 10 years. Mm-hmm. I mean, California's a nightmare. It's a joke. It's
now he's going to try to claim Florida residency, but they have the jock taxes in a lot of these states to get you guys anyway.
That's exactly right. That's exactly well, and you pay on the road. You pay where you play. You pay taxes on the days you work at home. But again, when you're talking $300 million, that's not It's not like he's gonna, have to retire and walk away and get a job. But the fact of the matter is, this is a guy I think who in addition to taking the 10 years, was after a much lower pressure environment. And
that was my final question to you on this. Is this so we see the Padre motivation here. They've not been, we're going on a decade now. They've not even been a legitimate franchise in Major League Baseball. Okay. So they needed to do something to get some kind of legitimacy. You have a large Hispanic population in Southern California. So this is one of the great Latin American stars in the game. So there's lots of marketing opportunities and things of that nature along those lines too. So
not a small point either.
Yeah, no, not a small point at all. No. But is this Machado as a player now essentially saying, Curt, that I like to win, but if the choice is a nice life and I'm kind of playing off, in this quiet little Idaho here in the city of San Diego where there aren't any expectations, and I'm going to spend every meaningful year probably, or most of them in my career in this uniform with this contract, he's essentially prioritizing, his quality of life over, doing whatever it takes to chase a ring. Don't you? Is that fair?
That's fair. And I was talking to my oldest son and I were talking yesterday, and I said, this tells me that he's a guy who is after comfort rather than a ring, which is, again, that's totally the player's prerogative.
Yes, absolutely. Because you know what? Here's the thing too. There's been a lot of all-time great players in all of these pro sports that did everything they could to win a ring and still could not. Barkley, Malone, or Dan Marino, Ernie Banks. Yeah. We could do this with every sport. These are all-time greats and couldn't do it.
Here's the thing. Think about this. We talk often when we talk about baseball. What's the worst division in baseball?
It's the National League West.
Okay, I think it's the AL Central.
Oh, now it is, but I would say over historically in recent era.
Right now,
it's the West, but now it's the Central, and it's not even close.
Is Manny Machado not a player that could turn a team in the AL? Right.
You and I think right now 88 wins that division? Would you win that division with 88 wins?
When you look at the young talent the White Sox have assembled, and listen, I don't blame him for choosing San Diego over playing with the White Sox.
Because if you go to Chicago in that division when you're playing the Tigers and the Royals and the Twins 19 times, and you go 75 and 87, all the fingers are getting pointed at who in a city like that? Hardcore. It's a cold town, and we paid $100 million.
We're supposed to be in the playoffs.
That's exactly right. That's a good point, too.
That's not going to happen in San Diego.
Yeah, that's a good point, too. All right, let's move on to the NFL and your favorite team, the Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't know that I've ever seen this before in the NFL. All right, so, you and I, last time we talked about Antonio Brown and the curse of the Madden, or the Madden curse living up to its billing for the Steelers this season. We talked about that the amount of drama the Pittsburgh franchise has had this year is probably more drama than they've had combined since Chuck Noll walked through the front office doors for the first time like 50 years ago. This is like the St. Louis Cardinals of the NFL. They just don't have drama. They're never terrible. They might not always be great, but they're kind of just always there. They're always respectable at the very least.
Football is holy ground in Pittsburgh.
Yes,
right. It is.
They don't do prima donnas. They don't. There's rarely off-season turmoil. I don't remember it my whole life.
Cheerleaders. They don't do any. They don't have to. The stadium fills out because season tickets in Pittsburgh are like being a season ticket holder in Green Bay. It's a family rite of passage.
So I'm wondering if this unprecedented thing we saw yesterday, where Antonio Brown met with Steeler ownership. They each tweet out pictures of, kind of a kumbaya exit interview. Thanks for the years. Time to move on. Because the Steelers are giving away all their trade leverage here. They're going to get nothing in return now for a 31-year-old receiver who's cost a guaranteed $21 million under the salary cap. They're not getting a first-round pick for him. They'll be lucky to get a second-round pick for him now.
They're getting a first.
How much? I'll bet you a Coke Zero. They don't get a first-round pick for him. Okay. All right. But do you?
And that's what this meeting was about.
You think that's what it was about? Okay, explain. Go ahead.
Well, I think that AB recognizes his potential suitors out there are few and far between. Mm-hmm. So taking the leverage away from the Steelers doesn't do him any good. If he wants to go where he wants to go, he has to give the Steelers back a little something. So this is I think this was poised to be hey, listen, You're right. It's a rarity. I've never seen it. I'm glad he did it. I think it speaks volumes for him, but I also think it makes him much more attractive to potential suitors. And okay, this guy's not gonna have a scorched earth campaign, one way or the other. More importantly, I think there's a potential for, we wanted to part ways, but it didn't work out, and I'm going to stay here kind of a thing. Mm-hmm. Where I don't think before, if it was a trade, if it was a Keyshawn Johnson situation, or, you know what I'm saying, it's not, we have to move this guy or it's a problem. This is, hey, listen, we're going to move him, but we're not going to be forced to move him. So
I'll give you one caveat. The Raiders have the 3 first-round picks, which we've seen before in the NBA draft. We've almost never, ever seen before in the NFL draft. So I could see the Raiders, with the amount of cap room they have, and essentially burning a first-round pick. Because here's the problem. If you do 3 first-round picks, those guys, if they all hit, they all go into their option year the same year and kill your cap. Okay? Yep. So I could see the Raiders being the one team, and I shared with you this article from the Draft Network that's becoming one of my new favorite NFL analytics sites, and they looked at franchises that have the room under the cap that could justify $30 million or $20 million for him, and what the Steelers want. And I looked at, they have the 49ers. I would not put him there with a still developing quarterback like Jimmy Garoppolo. And
hey, what are the Raiders picks? Do you know?
Well, one of them, the highest is 4th, and I don't remember off the top of my head what the other 2 are. Okay. The Packers, could you see him fitting with the culture of that franchise?
Yes.
You could.
Because he's already been in one, right? I mean, the Steelers are no different.
Essentially, they would be trading Antonio Brown for Randall Cobb, essentially. Which most people would make that trade straight up. The problem is this one's going to cost you. This is what Green Bay has only done a couple times ever for a quarterback, and then they did it for the linebacker Clay Matthews. $20 million a year for a skill player not named Brett Favre or Aaron Rodgers. They've just never done that in Green Bay. For 25 years, they haven't done that.
They've never had to, because Green Bay was kind of a New York Yankees sort of a destination for football, right?
Right.
I mean, it's football.
Ever since Reggie, they kind of have run a Steelers type of an organization, all right, where they're kind of another no drama team in the offseason as well. The Raiders we mentioned is a possibility for him. I could see them being a team that just says, you know what are the odds that we get 2 or 3 good years out of him that are better than the last of our first round picks, and we give one of those up to get him. I could see Oakland doing that.
Gruden isn't there for a 9-year project.
In Vegas right now, the favorite to land him, the Jets. They have like $90 million under the cap. You've got a young quarterback. Sam Darnold, I think, had the highest QBR in the AFC in December, in the last month of the year.
They've been at the top of every time a free agent goes free agent now.
Because they've had all this money to the cap now.
They
for the
have
last
the money,
couple of years.
But explain to me, and you know football. To explain, as a Jets fan, I got to be frustrated. They have the money, but have they showed you that they have any discipline whatsoever in who and how they spend it?
They've kind of swung the pendulum the other way now. So what they did is they went out there, who's the old defensive coordinator that was their head coach that I'm thinking of, Rex
Ryan?
Rex Ryan, when he was their coach. And they went out there and spent pretty, a lot. They were making it rain. But they never really quite had the quarterback. They thought they did with Mark Sanchez and never quite had the quarterback. So what the new management has done there is essentially strip the roster bare. And got rid of all that dead money, and now they have their franchise quarterback in Sam Darnold. They just made a new head coaching hire. I could see them now going out there and saying, "We have our quarterback. All right, now's the time to go out there." And now, because before what they did is to try to add stars with questionable quarterbacks. Now I think they've got a franchise quarterback.
But is this not kind of a football version of Machado? Isn't Antonio Brown the guy you bring in as maybe that last piece or that?
Which is why I'm telling you, and I said this the first time. And they're the last team on this list here at the Draft Network. And the first time we talked about this last week, this was the team I gave you. The perfect fit is New England. They would force him culturally. He would conform because history has. He knows. The second he goes prima donna, it doesn't matter, man. If it's the AFC divisional playoffs or next week, they will cut his ass, and he knows that.
He's already played for a franchise that you cannot be bigger than.
Mm-hmm.
right? In Pittsburgh, you're never bigger than the Steelers. Just like in Green Bay.
That's why he's getting traded, because he was under the faulty assumption that he could be. Yes.
Yes. And so maybe he says, what? And again, this gets back to the kind of the Machado question. What's the most important thing to him? If it's winning rings, he takes a little less and goes to New England and puts on 2 or 3 more rings. And the entire world gets pissed because Tom Brady has 8, but that's another discussion.
Yeah, you want to prolong Tom Brady's career. And this is where you're probably going to lose Rob Gronkowski. He's probably going to retire here in a couple of weeks. All right. And, when you think of tight ends like that, it's him, Tony Gonzalez, Russ Francis. You go back, who was
Antonio Gates?
Antonio. I mean, there's like one of these guys every 5 or 6 years. The odds you're going to just replace him with another top tight end. Instead, what you do is you become more now of a downfield passing attack. And Julian Edelman now has even more area open in the slot because you've got Antonio Brown taking the top off of defenses.
I have to tell you, though, when I think about just like putting Machado in a lineup somewhere, like a dream lineup, when I think about Antonio Brown, I think about, from a fantasy perspective, can you imagine matching him up with Aaron Rodgers? I mean, and
Devontae Adams on the outside.
Yeah.
But, man, Aaron Rodgers is even more prickly than Roethlisberger. Yeah,
well, here's the thing. You know what stunned me, by the way, yesterday when we were talking about Kaepernick? Aaron Rodgers is the number 1 ranked quarterback in quarterback rating all time. I'm going to give you 2 guesses, and I'll bet you don't get it. Who is number 2?
Which formula are we using? The current QBR?
In the NFL QBR.
Of all time. Minimum how many years?
Yeah. It's an established guy.
A guy that's playing right now?
Yes.
Oh, boy. So if Rodgers is number 1, then it's obviously not going to be Tom Brady.
Nope.
Who is it?
Russell Wilson.
I could see that. Yeah, I could see that.
Totally blown away by that.
Yeah, I could see that.
That snuck up on me.
Let's move to college football. Interesting story out of the state of Nebraska. All right, so it's a bad, interesting story. A few days ago, an arrest warrant was issued for running back Maurice Washington, one of the first prized recruits of the Scott Frost era. And the arrest warrant is for distributing child/revenge porn. For those of you that don't know, the current online lingo, and I had to look some of this up myself, but apparently revenge porn is when you have intimate photos, videos of you and a former significant other, and in order to get back at him or her for dumping you, you share them with others to shame them. All right. Now, the problem with this particular case,
it's a crime.
It's a crime. The problem with this particular case, it goes another step in that they were minors. All right.
Okay. And I'm going to jump in here.
Yep.
I don't know the full details, and if I'm wrong and if I make a mistake, please correct me. And I'm not excusing this, but I'm also saying that I'm not sure if this wasn't a 17-year-old girlfriend who said she was 19. I mean, because when we say
it's not
child
that.
porn,
It's not. Okay.
Okay.
They were both minors. They were dating in high school. It's not that.
Okay. Good. Okay.
Yeah.
Because generally,
but you're right. You're right that there needs to be some clarifications on some of those things.
But there never is because it's much juicier this way.
Plus, remember, he's not a 19-year-old who thought a girl that was visiting his college town on the weekend was of age and was 17. But they were both in high school at the time.
My biggest concern when we talk about things like that, when you say child porn, your first thought is going to a very dark, horrible human place.
Yes.
And this is just somebody being an idiot.
So now the controversy is about what did the university know and when did they know it? Here's where the story leaves off, because the original story from the Associated Press said that the university was contacted about this right as the season was getting started, and Washington was allowed to remain on the team the rest of the way. Then the story was corrected to say that the university wasn't contacted, but the former state attorney general, who was the attorney general at the time and now no longer is. But the former state attorney general was contacted because this all happened out of state, by out of state authorities to say, hey, we're investigating this and it looks like this is leading towards an arrest. And he is claiming that he never notified the university that he was contacted by law enforcement from another state that one of its players may be charged imminently with revenge porn and child porn distribution, and he has since been charged. Are you buying the fact that would mean that he was the Attorney General of Nebraska at the time, and he didn't tell the university about something like that? Are you buying
Here's
that?
My first question: as an attorney general, your job is to get convictions and to put people in prison. What advantage would he give him? And I'm not saying he didn't, but why would you contact the university before you had done your due diligence and done your work? In the sense that, is there any doubt in your mind in Nebraska what the University of Nebraska is, which side they're going to fall on for this until they can't anymore?
Well, the reason why is because we've had numerous scandals along these lines on college programs all over the country. By the way, one of the first schools to be struck with scandals like this, Nebraska, at the end of the Tom Osborne era with Christian Peter, if you remember that, and Lawrence Phillips, what did he do? A Bulldog or DDT, a member of the women's basketball program, or put her head upside a mailbox. I don't remember what that was. It was 20 years ago. So this is a university community that's no stranger to these kinds of stories. The reason you notify the university is you have a potential sexual predator on campus with access to how many thousands of women amongst the co-ed population. That's why.
And I think if that was a potential danger, it would have happened. I think that they looked at this as a one-off. As maybe this wasn't a pattern of behavior. This was again, I don't want to be on his side, but I can see, unlike some of the stories we talked about last year in Ohio State, where it was clearly obvious everybody was trying to save the football program, I can see that here. I'm not so sure I jumped to that conclusion immediately on that.
I don't buy it at all. To me, here's my experience. My experience has taught me whenever the bureaucratic institution, and we've talked about this before too, whenever the bureaucratic institution preemptively admits to incompetence as a defense, it's because the truth of what happened is worse. This former Attorney General of Nebraska is either terrible at his job or a terrible human being. Okay? Yes. One or the other. All right? And something tells me, given the changes and alterations that have been made to this story so far, the end of this has not yet been written. More will come out. Yeah.
Hey, speaking of that, I want to point out, tomorrow we have to talk about it. The story that you pointed me to on, and I hate to give them credit, but the writing was phenomenal.
It's the last story in our rundown, and I put it last in case we didn't have time.
Yes,
so we would lead off with it tomorrow. So barring Bryce Harper signing today or some other cataclysmic event, we're going to talk tomorrow to lead off maybe one of the finest pieces of sports writing I've ever read in my life.
And I implore anybody that's going to watch the show, go read the article on Tim Donaghy, written on ESPN. It's an incredibly lengthy piece, but probably some of the best writing I've ever read.
You and I have both tweeted it, by the way.
Yes.
So you're at Gehrig38. I'm at Steve Deace Show. We have both tweeted it out in the last 24 hours. You can get right off of our Twitter feeds as well.
And I can't wait to talk about
it. Yeah, it's great stuff. Curt, we'll see you tomorrow.
All right, buddy.
Take care.